Welcome everyone. We're going to begin the webinar now. My name is Judy Foley and I'm here with Lori Jo Wallace. We're going to be talking to you about the core components of sustainability, which are recruitment and engagement, in order to have successful partnerships. Lori Jo, do you want to say a little bit about your position here?
Hello everyone. My name is Lori Jo Wallace. Folks often call me LJ, just to remember it. And I'm the Director of Training and Capacity Building, which is a department here at Health Resources in Action. Been here for a long time and really enjoy working in communities with coalitions and community members, parents, professionals, do a lot of work with engaging youth as well, and really have spent a lot of time trying to support people in thinking about how do we really work in community and how do we really establish partnerships, because that is the core of this work that we're doing. So I'm pleased to be here today, and you might have met both myself and Judy if you were at the workshop mini conference that was held back at the beginning of May, because we were there in support of that conference as well.
Great, thanks LJ. And my title is Director of Special Projects, and I've been working with coalitions for about 20 years in Massachusetts in a whole bunch of different capacities, but mostly providing technical assistance and sometimes directing coalitions. And so I have some first-hand experience. I hope that you use today's webinar to really get your questions answered, and I'm going to walk through some logistics to explain how you can get those questions answered. So, one second. All right. So most of you have gotten as far as joining the webinar and by using the link. For all of you who have called in, right now I have you on mute. You're going to be able to mute yourself once I unmute you, but we're going to do that a little bit later. There's a couple of discussion slides that we're going to have. If you're logged in through your computer, and you don't have a mic, you're not going to be able to join us verbally and as part of the discussion, so you might want to consider using your phone. In order to join the conversation, you'll absolutely, if you logged in by your computer, you'll absolutely need to have had both the 9-digit code entered and your PIN, which is unique to you, so I can't give you that PIN. But if you enter both of those pieces, the 9-digit code and the PIN, and I unmute you, you'll be able to join the conversation later on. If you're just joining by phone and not even as part of and seeing the slides, you are always welcome to comment, question, or add any input into the question box, and that will be on the control panel on the right side of the screen. So please feel free to try that out now. You can send me a little message that says hi, or tell me what your favorite color is if you want to try the question box, and it won't be anything too hard to do. So if you want to try entering something into the question box now and hit send so that we know it's working, that's great. Your questions will be answered as they come in and or during the Q&A. We'll try and fit them in as we're moving forward. Immediately at the end of the webinar, you're going to get a pop-up survey, and we ask that you fill that out as soon as possible. And a few days after the webinar, we'll be able to forward to you the link to the slides and the recording so that you can share this recording with maybe your other members of your partnership or your colleagues. Right now, we have 6 people registered and in joining the webinar, and we are expecting about 18. So I'm thinking a few other people are going to join us later. A few other pieces of logistics that, again, I said that everybody's muted right now. I will unmute you when we get to the conversation pieces. And I ask that if you are joining by phone, please don't put us on hold, because we'll be subject to your background music, and we'll have to talk over that. So don't put us on hold. Thank you. And again, you can join our conversation, add any comments, add questions in the question box, and we'll try to address those as we go through. Okay. One other piece is that when we we're talking to the folks at the Department of Health and talking about this webinar, it was really to try and answer some of the needs that the HES had said that they wanted in support of their partnership development. So we came up with the learning objectives that you can see on your screen that we're hoping to convey the value and the importance of multi-sector partnerships, particularly in this current public health environment. It really is essential to do public health work. Nobody can do this alone, and we're not ever going to do it program by program. It's going to take true partnership. And we are hoping to identify and utilize effective techniques both to recruit people, to keep them at the table, engage them, and retain them as partners as you move through your initiative from year to year, and explore some and apply some techniques to sustain the efforts over time, because you want to make sure that everybody's involved, and you want to make sure that that involvement is sustained, that it's not just a shot in the dark. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to LJ. Again, if you have any technical issues or any questions as you move forward, just you can type it into the question box. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. And I just want to point out that so far only Mia has been able to or has put anything into the question box. So if anyone else wants to, just as a way of letting us know that it's working for you, please do. And we'll get to a point where we're actually going to ask you some questions. So again, you can do it verbally. We'll unmute everything, or you can do it through the question box. But we will launch into the content of the webinar now. Oh, good. We heard from Rachel too. And we will also spend a moment when we get to the open questions of just having folks introduce themselves so we can say who is on the call or on the webinar. So we're going to move into the content, as we said, and this webinar is really focusing on partnerships, and I know some of you may have had some information around this before. One of our president, Steve Verdini, actually has done some work around partnerships, I know, with your HES coalitions and HES groups in the past, but it has been an issue that has come up, and the Department of Health has told us that this is some information they've heard from a lot of groups, and maybe some of you haven't been involved before and haven't been able to been to other training or information around partnerships, although obviously partnerships are a part of all of this work, so I know that you all know a lot about it, and that's why we really are excited to hear from you as much as possible in the context of a webinar. But we did want to start with what is sustainability, because ultimately, even from the very beginning of any project or any program, we are looking towards how can we sustain it. If it's a worthwhile coalition, if it's a worthwhile project, we're always thinking about how can we really make it a part of what we're doing and not just a project that comes and goes. That does happen. That's a part of all of our work, but the goal, particularly I think, of this initiative, which is really bringing together so many strands of your community already through the HES work, that it would be really important to think about how to sustain that. So this is, I think, a great definition of sustainability. The process, I'm just going to read it even though you can see it yourselves, but the process of maintaining an initiative by weaving a practice into the fabric of the community or making a permanent home for a practice within the community. So this idea that it becomes really a part of your community. And I think, again, for your initiative, what we understand of it, this is a really crucial part of the work you're doing. How can you really focus on the work you're doing now, but think about how to continue it into the future and make it really something that your community cannot survive without. I think that's another way of thinking about it. And it might not be as it looks now. It might look differently as it becomes woven into the community. I would also say that partnerships are a real core piece of this work, and maybe in terms of sustainability, one of the main pieces of it. Often the work does need to be taken into one partner or another's work, or integrated into that, or partners can share the ongoing sustainability of any partner, of any project. So continuing on.
LJ, can I just interrupt? As I'm just sharing one example from a partnership that's been working in Fall River for a long time. They're over 10 years old. And one of their pieces when they started out was they would move from funding source to funding source, and eventually they ended up forming a 501c3.
Yeah.
So that was their answers to sustainability. There are others, and we can talk about them as we move through, but I just wanted to offer that as a way the community really changed, and they merged funding sources to form this new entity.
Right. The other thing I've seen happen a lot is that people are very wedded to how the initiative starts and that what the initial goal of it was. And I know we are all cautious about mission creep and not just trying to find funding to sustain anything. But I think we do have to be open to really looking at an initiative, being able to grow or change or shift and not maybe be what it was at the beginning, because that's really often what sustainability means, that it has to really become woven into the community. It can't look exactly like it was started out to look. It's got to be open to shifting and growing and changing to meet the needs of that community.
But I think that's the beauty of the health equity zones, is that they're starting out broad.
Right.
Even though they might have individual focuses and topics, I think that change from a single topic into a larger broad focus of, say, public health or population health is challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen that too. Yeah. Thanks.
So just this next slide is the elements of sustainability. I don't know if folks are familiar with all of these, but they do make up, when you're thinking about that weaving into the context of the community, the pieces that need to be in place. Starting, obviously, when we think about sustainability, funding always immediately comes to mind, but funding stability is key, but it's certainly not the only piece. Along with, because some of these other pieces support the funding as well. Political support is, again, another key piece of the work, and obviously this initiative comes through the state, so there is political support involved. Communications, which we're going to talk about. Communication around any work you do is extremely important, and one of the pieces that often doesn't get a lot of attention focused on, because it is a whole different, sometimes a whole different set of skills, but it is something we can all do and we all need to pay attention to. Evaluation. I know that all initiatives start with evaluation and they continue moving through, and that's something that I feel has changed since I've been doing this work. Is that evaluation was often something we thought about at the end. Okay, now we need to evaluate once we've done the whole program, and now I know evaluation is really looked at as starting at the very beginning and assessing as you go on. Organizational capacity, again, looking at your coalition, what can you really do? How can you really continue the work? How can you support the work and structure the work? And a lot of recruiting, engaging, and retaining members is a part of organizational capacity. We are going to talk about that today in reference to partnerships, but it also connects to organizational partnerships. And partnerships. Who's out there? Who's working with you? And again, as Judy said, that the HES is set up to be a partnership. So I think that's a very fascinating part of it. And first and last, strategic planning. The idea of really looking at the vision and mission and how does that really come into action. And again, strategic planning, like evaluation, is not something you can do once. You need to continue to do it.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to say one other thing about the organizational capacity, that might also be part of how the HES is structured.
Yeah.
There might be task forces to accomplish something short term, and there might also be some committees that are set up long term, and sometimes governance structures are necessary if you got a particularly contentious set of leaders.
Yeah.
But to set up also transparency on how decisions get made and who has authority to make what decisions.
Right. So these are definitions here on the next slide, and talked a little bit about them already, but part of the funding stability is talked about here as diverse resources and funding streams, which is a little bit different than the other slide. It talks about funding stability, but obviously diverse resources and funding streams are what make funding stability. But today we are going to focus on partnerships, and with that, the part of organizational capacity that's recruiting, engaging, and retaining new members and new leaders. and also communication. So they all three connect with the under partnerships. So we're now going to move into the part of the first part of the webinar where we're going to ask you to either write or talk. And so we're going to open up the line if you'd like to talk, if you'd like to write, but we really would love to hear at least something from everybody. So and moving into what we're going to ask you to talk about is really a cost-benefit analysis. And there you go. Oops. Which is something that to allow you to talk, we have to unmute and mute, so it takes a minute here. It really, in thinking about this, it's a way of thinking about it's a business model, really, cost-benefit analysis, but what works and what doesn't work. So what I'm going to ask you to do is sort of an interactive piece here is think about a group in which you have been a member. So, and first please just start with the benefits. Don't move to the costs yet. And this could be any group. It does not have to be a professional group. It can be a group in your personal life. It can be a team. It can be a committee. It can be a part of a religious affiliation. It can be anything that you're doing, or it could be a part of your professional life. Sometimes professional things are things that we were required to do, whereas sometimes things in our personal life we choose to do. So that's not always true, but that's why we like to give you the opportunity of thinking about something in your personal life. So if you could just think for a moment and brainstorm and start typing, or typing what are the benefits of belonging to this particular group. So it only works well if you really get a group in your mind.
Okay, everybody is unmuted. There's a few folks who have muted your own phones, so we're not going to be able to hear you unless you unmute yourself. So you can feel free to join.
Yeah. Who is, and you introduce yourself quickly on the phone. Mia, are you there? Maybe you could start, and then we'll go around from there.
Hi. Oops. Oh no. My handset is stuck.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Mia, is that you?
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear someone. Could you introduce yourself?
So we have Christina Holm on the line, but I think she's muted herself. Christopher, do you want to say who you are, where you are? Okay. How about Cindy?
Oh, hi, it's Mia Patriarca.
Oh, great. Hi, Mia.
Can you hear me?
Yep, Cindy.
I'm Cindy Buxton. Yes, I'm Cindy Buxton from the South County HES, Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds.
Hi, Cindy.
And I'm thinking of one of the important things that I get out of belonging to a particular group I'm thinking of is a sense of community and common purpose.
Great, thank you. How about Emily? Emily Spence? And Mia, what would you like to say a benefit?
And I'm sorry, I was having technical difficulties with my phone. I couldn't get it to unmute, and so I was finally able to convince it. Can you repeat the question?
Sure, it's on the screen, but we asked folks to think about a benefit of belonging to any group that you're a part of, in your community or not in your community. And we've already heard a sense of community, a sense of being a part of something.
Sure. I mean, for me, personally, whenever I've been a part of a group in my own community, it's the sense of being able to accomplish far greater things than I could on my own, having far more influence and reach, and also, developing relationships that, are beneficial far beyond whatever project we're working on.
Great.
I think it's about, capacity and influence and all of that.
Great. And Michelle, I think Michelle Barnes is not there. Are you there? And then finally Rachel. Rachel Green, are you there? Rachel Newman Green? We have actually heard from some people. Oh, Rachel and Christina have written. Christina's saying that bringing a different set of skills and talents to the projects and program, the mission. And Rachel's talking about sharing financial responsibility and division of task and responsibility, professional networking, social, so a lot of things, connections with others. Emily adds ability to better serve the families they work with. So sharing tasks, connecting, social, professional, a lot of benefits. So let's move to the cost. So for now, think of maybe the same group, maybe another group that you've left even. Another group that you were a part of that maybe you left, or maybe you haven't left, but just what are some of the costs of belonging to that group? And the first thing that comes up from Emily is time. Yep, always a big one. Other things. You can either type or speak. Might take you a moment to think, that's fine.
All right, nobody's going to say it, I'll say it. I'm always worried that they're going to ask for more than I can deliver. You know, whether that's a longer commitment or more time or something like that. Yeah, more than I bargained for. Anything else, you can type into the question box, or your lines are open, so you feel free to jump in. You're going to shy.
You know,
Go ahead.
With groups, excuse me, with groups, that there is always the issue of how effective and efficient they're going to be. I mean, some groups, are more focused. Others, are not quite as clear on their goals and objectives, and sort of focused on achieving their ends. So, obviously having a good facilitator really helps, but, I think, there's always, some are more effective than others, let's put it that way.
Right. So we often hear that, facilitation, planning. If you feel like time, Emily immediately brought up time, and I think that's a huge thing for many of us, but we often hear how well planned is the group? How are you feeling like your time is being used well? Do you feel like you can give something back to the group? Also, decision making is brought up. Rachel brought up decision making can be slower or less effective when working with a group, and we know that's true. The more people involved, often decision making is can be very cumbersome and take a long time. So it's that balance between people feeling connected and feeling like they have a part of the decision and moving things along. In every group I've ever worked with, it's been a balance between process and product. And what's hard is when part of the group really wants process and part of the group really wants product. So I think those are very complicated pieces. And then also Christina brings up the complexity of work plans due to all the people involved. So again, the same idea that you have a lot going on, you have a lot of people you're managing, and I think to be as clear as you can about the roles and the decision-making responsibility of every piece of your project is very important.
But you know what I have to say? And so I'm somebody who is much more of a product person. I like to get to the decision quickly. But this is my age speaking, I think the older I get, the more I truly appreciate the power of process, because when it's when everybody's involved and you get to hear all the different voices, we always come to a better decision.
I think it's true. So thank you for that feedback, and I appreciate people both writing and speaking. We're going to move along and mute it again, but we actually do have some places. The other couple questions we're thinking about what keeps coming you back and why do you leave a group. But some of the costs for the why do people leave groups are what you brought up, time and effort. Again, not feeling like you're appreciated. And that's what I think sometimes we take for granted. We're all in it. Most of us are professionals. But why do people leave? Because they feel like no one cares if they're there or not. I read one time there's a huge statistic between the first time people come to a meeting and then coming back, that often there's a big gap. They come to the first meeting, they don't feel included, they don't feel like anyone even noticed they're there, and they don't come back. So that's a little bit different. That's more about initial engagement, but but this lack of appreciation I think is huge. All these other issues come up for folks, burnout, Judy brought up, you know, feeling like you can't give enough, the pressure for additional commitment, the box in the middle, really not even feeling like you can give anything, lack of skills to really function. And then over on the right-hand side, the unresolved interpersonal conflict. When you walk into a group and there's a lot of tension, it's really uncomfortable for many people. So how do you resolve any conflict that's normal to happen in a group? But how do you resolve that and not take too much time and also make it so you're moving forward, but people feel like there's resolution?
That's a whole webinar right there.
Oh, that's days of training. No, that's a lot of, you can really think about conflict in a lot of its form. You can spend quite a bit of time in, because I really do believe that it's not a thing many of us feel that comfortable, particularly in a bigger group of people, feel that comfortable resolving.
But if it's done well and it's normalized,
yep,
and it's not personalized, it can be a really growth, a big growth piece for a group to work together. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, the last ones are just lack of direction from leadership, lack of any progress, and finally back to time, giving up other things because you're in this group. So moving ahead, so what are the benefits then? A lot of the things that you said for the benefit side, really improving the neighborhood, making change, gaining your own personal recognition. Sometimes we feel like we don't need that, but just on the other side of feeling appreciated, feeling like it's meaningful that you're there, that you're seen is an important piece. Using skills, and we're going to talk a little bit later about a learning community, but do people really feel like they're a part of a learning community? Again, helping other people, supporting the group to move forward, and really welcoming meetings. And I think that's something we don't think enough about. I think we all know it. We all know the importance of facilitation, the importance of a meeting that feels open and inclusive is the word I'm looking for, but not, but not still moving forward without spending all the time on welcoming people. And networking, talked about a lot also, again, a very important place to, it's a very concrete thing, and people often come to meetings when they know other people are going to be there, just so they can maybe sometimes make that connection. And that's not bad. That's maybe not moving forward the mission, but it's really, that can be part of your mission, networking and partnership building. And finally, and incentives and benefits. What are people really get from the meeting? That personal recognition might be part of it, but there's plenty of other kinds of incentives that people want to get from being part of a member of a group. Great. So that's really some of the cost benefits. And so now we're going to move to talk with you a little bit about what are you doing. And as we're talking about all this, I want you to think about, so what in my meetings am I offering in our coalition in terms of those benefits are we offering? And we have some specific questions here about engagement of new members. So now we're talking specifically about new members.
And so this is a poll. So we're going to ask you to participate as voting. What would help you feel more confident engaging new members in your collaborative? We anticipated some of the challenges that you can see here, that maybe you need written materials to present when new people arrive. Maybe you need a communication plan for HES members to recruit, and so they know what to say, they know what to ask. Maybe you need specific messages for targeted outreach, like if you need to get health systems engaged, how do you speak their language? Or maybe it's all of the above, or something we didn't think of. So if it's something we didn't think of, you can type it into the question box. If you want to vote now in the poll, I'll close it once we get all the votes in, but all you have to do is click on A, B, C, D, or write in the question box. So I'll give you a second to do that. All right. So it looks like we have a winner. I'm going to close the poll now, and I'm going to share the results so you'll be able to see. So it looks like most people feel like a communications plan would be most useful to engage new members. And then the majority of folks said all of the above. So it seems like thinking about components of that communication plan and materials to help too. What is that target outreach? So we'll talk a little bit about that later on too. Okay, thanks.
I was just going to add that one of the things I think that's really important in engaging new people is making people feel seen, like we talked about with the benefits. And I think having materials so they can catch up and understand, making sure that there's a communication plan where everyone knows what's going on, and then really being able to be clear about what the work is about. Those are all such important places to really feel like people are a part of it.
Yeah. And I'm going to refer back to that one of the first slides LJ talked about, because communication is a core component to the whole notion of sustainability. So we're going to get back to that. I wanted to share a visual with you when we're talking about multi-sector partnerships and what that really means. Lots of times it's easy to get people to the table who are doing work similar to yours, or if not identical or complementary to yours. So if I think about the work that we did in Massachusetts on substance abuse, it was easy to get substance abuse providers there, people who were invested in both prevention and treatment. It took a little bit more to get folks involved from the law enforcement community. It took a little bit more to get people from education to the table. But eventually all those folks understood that it was also meeting the agenda that they had to address this issue. Some of the people that came to the table because they heard of the work that we were doing that I had not ever anticipated were people who were running establishments that served alcohol. They understood that they were making their living selling a substance that was causing the community some concern. So they came to the table without being engaged. And after having seen that, that was one group that we always approached, the business community, who is really invested in making sure the community is safe and healthy and productive. They put their livelihood on that line. So there's a whole bunch of multi-sector components here, but if you think about the issue that you're addressing, think whose best interested is to have the same kind of outcomes that you're looking for. Certainly faith communities, they're about service and providing all the resources they can to the folks that attend their parish or temple. The schools are almost always invited to the table, but shouldn't be left out of any component. The business community, as I mentioned, there's a lot of clubs that are representative of business communities like the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club and so forth. They're open to having speakers present and hear about new issues that might not otherwise be raised in their meetings. And depending upon, again, your focus, any one of these would be appropriate to invite to the table. Sometimes you just never know. You're talking to somebody sitting next to somebody on the bus or in another meeting, a PTA meeting, or at a school function for your own child, and you strike up a conversation, and they're like, oh, you know who would be interested in that? So always think that somebody might care about your issue and want to join the effort as well. There's a couple of charts that I want to share with you in addition to this wheel, and to help it make a little bit more concrete. This is one that our agency, Health Resources in Action, has put together because we work with a lot of communities doing community health assessments and health improvement plans. And this was an organizational chart to help think about who should be at the table, who should be involved. And when we're thinking about health improvement plans, the answer is pretty much everyone. Yeah. But this is to be very specific, making sure that nobody gets left uninvited, who the key contact is, making it very specific, and then assigning somebody to do the outreach. So this is one form of the chart. And I'll share another one that the Department of Health will probably be using, they're going to do some follow-up, but it's pretty much the same type of chart. It's taking a look at these, in particular, these 4 sectors: the business sector, the government or public sector, the citizens, and those most impacted by the issues that you're addressing, and also voluntary or charitable and nonprofit sector. So looking at those and working through that, and I know Mia said that she'd be following up with the HESAs to take a look at how best to use these kind of charts. There's one other component of that. Again, it's a chart to help make this much more specific about who's going to do it and how to get them to the table. I have to say that I'll share one other story about some key informant interviews and focus groups we were doing in another state. And when we were asking folks about what was of concern to them, they said diabetes. When we dug a little bit deeper, it was that there was a lot of folks who were not getting the kind of exercise that they needed. And this was in a rural community in another state. And thinking about that, we dug a little bit deeper and said, what was keeping you from getting outdoors? Because we're thinking they're in the beautiful rural setting. And they said it was wild packs of dogs. We're keeping them in their houses a lot of the time. And so another partner that came to the table that had never been invited before was animal control, because they needed to be part of the solution. And that was a group that never would have come up had nobody raised that issue. So again, trying to think about all the folks who care about and what the barriers are that you're facing and how others can be part of the solution too.
I really it speaks to us doing your assessment about what are some of the barriers and why aren't people participating, as well as what would make it easy or for them to participate. It always makes me think of the social marketing tool about fun, easy, and popular. How to make something fun, how to make it easy to do, and how to make it popular, like a lot of people are doing it. And I think that is sort of, I always remember that when I'm thinking about trying to engage folks in any initiative or program, is how to really make it so people can. And that speaks to the wild, if you have wild packs of dogs that to go out of your house at night, you're not going to do it. So that speaks to the, I think making it easy for people and who can help you do that as a partner. This tool, I just want to mention these last 2 tools are something that you're going to be working on with the Department of Health through another component of the HESAs, and it's something that you'll be spending more time on. So they are good tools to thinking about who to really be partners and how to make it very concrete and identify all those folks. Because as we know, sometimes as a part of funding streams, there are required partners that we also need to have, and I think that's a part of the work that you're doing with the Department of Health. But usually my experience is that the government, the federal government or the state government, the funder who's ever requiring it, is usually based pretty much on what the community wheel looks like. So that will be an exciting new initiative you'll be working on moving forward in terms of planning and tracking. So as a part of the issue of recruiting members and participants, we really want to look more formally at partnerships. And so we have some questions here for you to consider. So I want you to just think about these questions, and then we are going to open up the line and the typing again, just to really hear a few examples, and not to answer all these questions, but maybe a few examples of a partnership that's really worked for you. So in thinking about these questions, what are some of the efforts happening in your community, and how are you linked to them? What are those key groups and organizations that you need to recruit and to accomplish your efforts? So that's the key thing. What's going on, number one, and then who do you really need to help you accomplish your efforts? And the other part is who might be invested in your efforts. Who cares about it? As we said before, with members, if people feel like they're recognized, they're appreciated, there's incentives, they're going to join. Same with partnerships, bigger groups. I think often partnerships are considered bigger organizations or groups. Not big, but more of a structured group as opposed to one person. Although certainly a partner can be one person. The other part of this fourth bullet, is a really important one, and this is, I think, a lot of times where coalitions and groups have not thought it through, but how are you supporting other community efforts? Often we ask folks to come to our meetings, our coalitions, our events, our advocacy days, whatever you're managing, but we also don't think about that it might make a big difference if we also go to whatever that group is really coordinating and supporting. And if they see us at their event, that might be a real place for opening up that partnership. And I think that's happened a lot in different communities. I can speak specifically to Boston, that we are often asking folks from, for example, the faith-based community to come to, this is doing tobacco prevention work, to come to meetings, coalitions, events at the State House. And what really became clear to us early on was that we need to also go to their place, their churches, their places of worship, and really try to do some tobacco prevention there. Maybe not us specifically, but really work with the folks there, as opposed to always expecting them to come to where we were. So it's about geographically going, but also really taking under your umbrella some community efforts that work in synchronistically with whatever your effort is. So at this point, I just wanted to open it up to see if anyone had an example of a partnership that worked well for them or is working well for them. We do have a few extra new folks joining on, so that would be great to hear from you.
And you're all unmuted, so you can
speak or type.
Yep.
Anyone have a good example?
Gateways Often Counseling. What are we doing?
Is someone speaking? Anyone have a good example of a partnership that's worked well for them or they've been successful at?
Hi, this is Cindy Buxton again from the South County Health Equity Zone, Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds.
Great. Hi, Cindy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm trying to engage the schools in our healthy eating and physical activity initiative called 5210. And one of the ways I'm doing that is getting on the school wellness committees, because they need to work on a wellness plan anyway. So that's a way of me helping them and then them helping me.
That's awesome. That's a real synchronistic thing that you figured out, that you'll help them and they'll help you, and you'll get to, I mean, so much of this work, as I know we all know, is those personal relationships, those personal connections. And there are meetings that I love to go to because I really care about the people and have built relationships with, and they're much easier for me to give and get and give with those people because we've built relationships. That's a great example. Anybody else? Any other good examples like that, or maybe something that's not working? These guys.
LJ, did you want to share the example about the sheriff's office?
Sure. Why don't we move to we'll move to the next slide, and you can still think about this because I think this example I have fits well with the next thinking about these partnerships, because there may be folks in a lot of different places that you're going to work with that may have different roles. And before we do that, a couple people did add on here. So Emily Spence has added that RHES has been partnering with Roger Williams University. This relationship is thriving, and they have a team of professors who are joining their working groups so they can connect our projects with their classes. That's an awesome example of these professors probably really want real-life opportunities for their students. So you've really figured that out. And we've had such great success with partnering with universities. I mean, sometimes it's challenging because they have specific needs, but particularly in finding interns and working with folks that really want to work on real-life projects or community projects. We've had many interns, but this idea that the professors are actually a part of your coalition, that's really great.
Terrific, thanks.
So this is something you may have seen before, but when I first saw this framework, it really made so much sense to me and made it clear what is important in partnerships. That really recruiting and engaging equals retention, but recruiting and engaging isn't all the same. It's different for different people. And I do think this is really helpful to remember, because sometimes we get really frustrated that some folks are not coming to every meeting. And that sometimes is the marker of success. Meetings are really important, depending obviously on what meeting, but some meetings are maybe more crucial than others. But meetings should be one place of engagement. There needs to be other ways that people can engage. So in looking at this framework, and think about who is your core circle. Who are those folks that really make the work happen, that are there, that come to things that you can count on, and who then is in your circle of engagement. Again, those are the people that are more consistent. You know where they are, they return your emails, they'll show up at things, but maybe not as often as that core circle. The circle of champions are those folks that you want as well. They might be professors, or they might be people that can help push your agenda out there, and maybe not as engaged as the engagement folks or as a core circle. And then the information and awareness, again, is much broader, and that's really just getting the information out there, but not expecting a lot in return necessarily, except that people know about what's going on, although maybe they can get folks to come to your bigger events, and you might also give out information about their bigger events. And then the possibility, that's the thing that often we don't think about right away, because we're so busy trying to get people into those core circle and the circle of engagement. But there are folks out there. I mean, we have a lot of advisory groups to our projects, and I know some people who may really not be able to commit anything right now, but I keep talking to them and thinking, well, in the future, you might think about doing this. So sort of planting those seeds in that circle of possibility. And what I love about this framework is that it can change. So people, hopefully, in your circle of possibility might become a part of your circle of engagement, or even your core circle. And we do also have to realize that people's lives change. People move on, as we all know, so they might move out of your core circle and up into just your circle of information. But they're all important, and there can be a lot of fluidity here. Sometimes it's hard and frustrating because people have skills, they've understand what you're doing, they're trained, and now they need to move because of their own life or what's happening. They need to move out of the core circle or the circle of engagement. But really being open to all those levels. And the example Judy mentioned was that about a coalition that had worked for a really long time. It was a violence prevention coalition to engage the sheriff's office. And they talked to him. They sent not just the sheriff, but their office. They sent them information. They went to them. They invited them to every single thing they did. But they really just stayed in that level of circle of possibility, maybe circle of information and awareness. The office did know what was going on, but they were persistent, this coalition, these leaders. They kept it going. They didn't give up. They kept them in that circle of information and awareness. And then one time they had this barbecue, at the sheriff's office had a barbecue, and they got invited. It was a broad barbecue, and this group from the coalition went, 2 or 3 people, and they made that personal connection with the sheriff directly. And because of that, they actually brought not the sheriff himself, but people from the office into that circle of engagement. And the sheriff's office wrote them into their ongoing funding grants, and they were now consistently funded every year. They got funding from the sheriff's office every year. But it took a long time, and it took not letting go of them in this broader framework before they brought them into the circle of engagement and really into the core circle. And they got funding stability from it as well, or a piece of their funding from it that went on, because often once you get written into a government place or a city place, you stay, unless things change completely, which they can.
And I think you hit it on the head earlier too, LJ. It's about those personal relationships and trust building, right? That's part of it, because those people stayed consistent. Their message stayed consistent, and their need to engage that sheriff's office was core for them.
Right.
And so it is about relationship, but also trust building, so that they knew that they were going to be an ongoing ally.
Right. So we are going to move on and think about, we've talked about really how you like to get information in our first poll and how you like to get new folks to come, or how you treat new people in your coalition. So again, we want to think about now, how are your new members oriented? So you've got new folks coming. You've got them there. It's maybe not even their first HES meeting, but they're coming. But how do you help them really orient? What can they expect at your meeting? How does communication flow? How do decisions get made? All of these things is it clear? Is it communicated well? So we have another poll for you.
Yeah, so I launched the poll, and you can choose one of the selections. We, again, anticipated some of the things that we've seen in the past that might happen with new members. So the first option is new members get a phone call to explain everything before their first meeting. So that's a personal outreach via phone. Or maybe a member who is not new sits next to them at the first meeting and explains things as they're going along, how decisions get made, or what that subject is, or what that acronym means. And then another approach is maybe to have new member orientation packets and a website for them to look at that explains what the governance structure is, maybe has some contact names and numbers, and or there's a buddy system set up where an experienced member checks in with them before and after the meetings. Say, what do you think? Do you think this is going to meet your needs? Do you think this is, going to be a possibility for you to continue? Do you need permission from your agency to be a regular member? And or sometimes there's no system in place. Maybe the new person comes to one meeting and doesn't come back, which is the statistics that you were talking about, LJ. If people don't feel like they're important, or they don't feel welcome, they don't feel like they're going to be able to contribute, they might not come back. So
I was just going to say that our first poll, we really wanted you to think about what do you need to feel confident, having materials, being able to do a good elevator pitch about your coalition. This poll, what we really are asking you, what do you actually have in place? So let's see what you have in place.
Okay. So it looks like some folks have an experienced member sit next to the new person, explain things as they go along. And a few people have a member check in before and after, but it looks like most people don't have a system. Well, this is an opportunity then to set something up, to make it an agenda item on your next meeting. Say, how do we welcome and retain new members? What kind of discussion do we have, and who's in charge to make them feel like it's going to be worthwhile to come back to the next one?
And this can be something their core group really does spend some time on. And I think it's one of those things, because we have so many deliverables, we have so many things to do, we often don't spend at least some time on thinking about how are we going to really keep those new members coming back and orient them. And I really do love the buddy system, which kind of connects with even that letter B, the second one, about having experienced member sitting next to them. That could be their buddy. It doesn't have to be a role forever, but then that person could call them and check in on them, or email them and say, oh, you coming back? We really were happy to see you. A lot of places that are really interested in keeping members, like churches, like even YMCA's, places like that, they really do extend that personal invitation. They call you, they say, we really are happy you came, we really want you to come back. And that means a lot to people.
Yeah. I also know that in the early years of doing some coalition work, several of the coalitions were setting up like Robert's rules to run the meeting by. And that really felt very alien to a lot of the community members. It felt very unwelcoming, and if you didn't know what Robert's rules were, you didn't feel like you knew when to contribute or how to contribute best. So that was something that was actually discussed, and we got rid of those quickly. Great. So I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about communication. We mentioned it before. It's one of the core pieces for sustainability, and it was one of the things that you mentioned that would be useful for doing that engagement piece. So again, this might be something that you want to do at your next HES meeting with your core group, or maybe there's a task force that puts together your communication message.
And sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
The great thing about task force is that it's not a long-term commitment. Sometimes the word committee scare people because they think, oh, I'm going to be on this forever. But a task force is something that comes together for a certain purpose, creating a communication plan, and then ends, I think a lot people might be open to doing.
Right. So for this topic, you might want to have them come up with a recruiting message. What is it that they should say about your heads? What is your focus? How long you've been around? What is your goal? It should be something that's pretty easy, very simple and repeatable. Not something that's very long and goes into all your evaluation strategies and your funding sources and a whole bunch of other pieces. It should be something pretty straightforward and something that is, again, repeatable, something that would be easy for everybody to remember.
And then you may also have specific messaging for sub-messaging for sub-projects. So you don't have to put, like G said, every single project in your overall message. You may have a specific message for a specific project or campaign you're doing.
Right. And looking at step 2, that message might need to be tailored depending upon who your audience is. So if you're looking to engage citizens living in the housing project near you, your message may be about getting their voices heard, mobilizing on issues that are important to them. If you're asking for the health systems to be part of changing the way they address diabetes issues, your message may need to be tailored, again, specifically, like what the ask is for that particular audience, but also what you're offering, too. That this is a long-term commitment from the community, multi-stakeholders who are passionate about this issue, and we'd like you to be part of the solution, right? Something really straightforward like that. And it also should be something that is repeated over and over again. If people are able to say what you do from an outsider's perspective, it raises your visibility. So if you can think of those circles that LJ was talking about, the core circle, the circle of information, you want other people so that if they are sitting next to somebody and says, oh, I'm on this new coalition, they'll say, I've heard of that.
Right.
Aren't they working on this topic? So you want to make sure that you have a tagline almost, and that you're using it and your members are using it.
And I'm working with a group of coalitions up in Lawrence, Mass. Right now, and I think what also is really important is that we have accessible language, not just different languages, which is important too, depending on where you are, but also accessible language for different folks. So, because I was working with this group of coalition leaders, and one person said, well, we really need to have language that parents and community members can understand about this or substance abuse issues, and not clinical language. And yet another person who was leading another part of the coalition said, but for some of our members, we do need to have clinical language because we're having clinicians and police and people that are really very knowledgeable about this come to this meeting. So you might have to have different messages for different folks.
Yeah. So components of the recruiting message, again, something that's clearly articulated. What is your goal? Should be short, sweet, and repeatable. You want clarity about what you're asking this new member or organization. What are your expectations? Maybe you're just really asking them to help spread the word. They have a newsletter or a website that you'd like a posting on. Maybe it's you'd really like them to be a key stakeholder voting on policy issues with you. So be really clear about what the ask is. And what the time frame for the initiative is, that we're funded through the next several years focused on this issue, and we'd like for you to help, again, be part of the solution. And why you need them at the table. What do they have to offer that nobody else does? In the violence prevention issue that you're talking about, that sheriff had a very important role to play in violence issues. If he wasn't, or his office wasn't part of it, the initiative wouldn't have moved as far as it did. But there are others that, again, can be ambassadors to other constituencies that you want to engage. In another situation, one of the first people at the table was a state rep. And what he lent was clout. Because when he showed up to meetings, everybody showed up to meetings.
Right.
And when he said this was an important initiative, then the mayors paid attention. So he knew that he had his clout and power to lend to it. He wasn't at every meeting, but he showed up often enough that people paid attention and realized this was something that they should also pay attention to.
And I think the other thing to always remember, and I'm sure we do, but, and I'm sure most of us, you do, is that it is really important to get those powerful political people with clout, but it's also really important to get the folks that are being impacted by a lot of these issues, and really their voice is so important. And I say that because I've spent most of my life engaging youth in different issues, and often they are overlooked, but they can just bring such value to what you're doing, and also such meaning in some ways. And that's, again, a whole nother training and workshop. But I just want us also to remember that, because I do feel like, I know I do, sometimes I really focus on those champions, which is another place we're going to talk about, and they are so important. But also we want to remember to focus on all the folks that are being impacted.
Right. And I also think that youth are a core component, like in that deal of members and multi-sector, that you can have youth leaders, and they have actually been a real critical piece of moving the tobacco cessation and prevention work forward in Massachusetts. So they might not show up as a segment on that multi-sector piece, but don't underestimate the power of youth to make something happen. Right. Step 3 in the communications, again, this is kind of a quick snapshot, is taking a look at how you get the word out. Sometimes you need to get the word out whether you're doing a kickoff of a new initiative or a new program. Maybe you have an annual event where you thank all your contributors and those people who have lent their clout. Or you're having an event or an announcement of your renewed funding, and you want to make sure that it gets out into the media. Most things that you think of as regular business can become newsworthy, even if it's just a quick blurb on your local cable show or on your Facebook page. So again, if people are familiar with your organization, even if it's something as mundane as we're starting our 3rd year of funding and we're off to a great start, and our membership is growing, make that newsworthy so that your name is out there and people understand that you're still there.
I was just going to add on this step 3, it has paid and non-paid media can be important of it, but also obviously social media would be a whole row on its own, that with print media, radio, and television, although those kinds of media are still important as well as social media.
Great. And just to pick up on that, so
there it is.
Step 4 is, like it's non-media communication. So, if you're got a Twitter account, you can be tweeting. If you have a Facebook page, that's been really popular among a lot of coalitions to have a Facebook page where people join the conversation. Or maybe you have a website that's interactive and dynamic. But also email is really great of getting the word out. It doesn't have to be a whole e-newsletter. It can simply be a quick announcement out to your constituency. Pamphlets are a little bit older in use, but billboards may be useful too, depending upon what you're doing. But this also is a nice chart to keep track of how you're getting the word out, what's working for you. Does it fit your audience that you're trying to influence, and is it working? Like, did you get any feedback? When you put something out, that's the best part about social media, is that when you put something out, by usually responses if it's getting any kind of play. When you put something out on cable TV, you're not going to know if anybody saw it or if they cared. But this is a tracking form. It's not specific to an evaluation piece, but it can be something that you can learn from and say, maybe we won't do that next time. That didn't get a lot of attention for our
Although those late night cable advertisements that are free, I always have when people say to me, oh, if I was on for something like, I saw you at 2 in the morning on that Boston City television show. So there are ways you can track it, but it is harder to, obviously non-paid media is sometimes harder to track than paid media. But these are a lot of examples of ways, word of mouth is the first one, the ways to really be able to get out information. The thing about word of mouth is you want to be sure that the information is accurate. That goes back to making sure that your communication message is clear to your members, and even going back to thinking about an elevator pitch about what your coalition is about. And I do think in public health, and probably in many fields, we use lots of terms that outside folks, what we consider out, I mean, public health is for everybody, but often people that aren't professional public health people get lost in the language because we're not. I remember one time my brother, who's not in this field at all, came to a training that I was doing on asset building, and he said it took him a good portion of the training to figure out that we were talking about assets as the strengths of young people and the strengths of community members, and he thought we were talking about houses and buildings as assets because that's what his context was. So I think it's really important to we need to be clear about, because they're both assets, but it depends what framework you're coming from.
So one quick question that came in that has an easy answer is yes, you'll have the forms and templates that will be sent as part of the webinar, and several of these are also on our website too.
So we're moving on to talk about something we've referenced already, but really thinking about community champions. And community champions are different than your members of your coalition. They're even different, again, than your partner organizations or your partners in running your collaboration or your coalition, in that they are folks that are probably not in your core, and they're probably core circle. They're probably not in your engagement. I mean, they can be, and that's great, like the example of the sheriff we gave. But they're most often folks that come in for a specific reason. They're part of, they're giving to your coalition and bringing a specific credibility or a specific attention that you want, and maybe around an event or maybe around a specific campaign. Now, some people do have community champions that are in the core circle, and that's a wonderful thing too. But I think there can be a variety of community champions. There are folks that maybe are political, like the representative that Judy talked about, or the mayor, or maybe some famous celebrity. But there are also folks that are the neighborhood block leader that really is known in that neighborhood that you're trying to reach, or the person the young youth leader who is known in the youth community as being really one of the experienced peer leaders of all because I know that Rhode Island has a lot of youth programming, and all the youth programming in Rhode Island, these peer leaders been in several programs, and he's really known. So I think community champions is a broad title. I think there are different levels, just like there are different levels of engagement, and there are different levels of credibility and popularity and influence. But I think it is really important to think about, push your outside the box about who might be a community champion and for what purpose. And again, they don't have to be your core circle. They can be someone that comes in, delivers some credibility or a speech or a talk or a poster, their picture, and then they step back. But I think it's something that sometimes in our work, at least my experience, we don't really think about. We don't think that someone who is not directly connected to public health would be interested, but people are interested. I think the work we do is very interesting to many people that are in business, many people are in government, that many people are in politics, that may not directly do public health work, but everybody cares about their physical health and nutrition. Everybody cares about young people. Everybody cares about, well, most people care about tobacco and health equity, even if we need to frame it in a different language. So I think that's a really important thing, again, to spend some time in your coalition about targeting some community champions.
Yeah. So I was just at a national conference, and one of the keynote speakers was the woman in charge of population health for Target stores. Mm-hmm. And again, the business community, they care deeply about the health of not just their employees, but also their population, because the less money people are spending on healthcare, mm-hmm. the more they think they can spend in their stores.
Right.
So they're maybe a champion as the business community.
I think the whole worksite wellness world, which is a very complex and complicated world of people providing benefits and for huge employers, is very interested in a lot of this work. I just did some work with the Massachusetts Coalition for Worksite Wellness, and they're very interested in the work we do because it directly impacts their work.
Great. So we have one more poll question. I'm going to launch it right now. And it's how do you keep your members engaged? Couple of ideas that you can select from things that you do now or would like to do are, do you rotate responsibility so it's not all falling on people's shoulders and they get burned out? You can explore levels of engagement that a member is able to commit to. You can say, you know, geez, I know you can't attend every meeting, but we'd really like to have your input. Could you, if we keep you informed via email, can you join that way? Create a learning community in your meeting or event space.
And we're going to talk about what that is exactly. I'm sure you have some ideas, but we're going to define that a little bit.
Yeah, and or shared decision making. Do you have a decision making process where people are able to vote and get their voices heard? And the last one is to diversify the kind of meetings and events that you plan.
Sometimes a pancake breakfast or a yogurt and granola breakfast is a great thing to have, as well as a potluck supper. So there's a lot of different kinds of things. Food is generally good.
Yeah. So the results so far are that about half the people have a shared decision making and half kind of diversify the meetings and events that you plan. That's great. Right. I know more and more coalitions are having being able to call into the meeting as an option if somebody can't make it there physically, if the distance is an issue or commitments are an issue. I
want to just speak for a moment about the decision making, because I think it is such a key piece, and it's something that, again, we could spend another webinar on. And I really appreciate that so many of you really do feel like there's shared decision making, because I think it's a hard thing to do, and that was brought up as a challenge early on as a cost, trying to get so many folks to decision making and to balance that process and product. So I appreciate that you're doing that, and it'd be interesting to share it maybe in next meeting how you are sharing decision making and what kind of decisions seem to work for sharing. And there's certain kind of decisions, honestly, even though I am definitely a process person, I would love to. This is Lori Jo, just so you distinguish Judy and I, because Judy's the product person. I would love to have some decisions not be shared. It's fine for this person, the leader, the coalition leader, whoever, to say they're making these decisions, because I don't think anyone wants to make every single decision. So those I think are really important. And so remember about the levels of engagement. That's the circles we shared. So maybe you can go back and think about that. And rotating responsibilities of meetings, I think, can be it sounds sort of mundane, but it can be a very key place for people to feel like they're a part of something. We rotate in my own staff meetings, we rotate facilitation, even amongst the admin folks. And it's really important that they get an opportunity to facilitate. And the meeting becomes theirs, not that theirs, as much as everyone else. It's not that we all can't give feedback. So I think those are, and also great skill building.
Yeah, it is great capacity building, so that just in case the person who usually runs it isn't there, the meeting can go on, and
right,
and you have other shoulders to lean on.
Right. Great. So thanks for participating in that last poll. We do have one more idea to talk about, and that's this idea of a learning community. And so I want you to think about what when you hear the terms learning community, what comes to mind for you? What are some things that you think about? We put some things here, but what we do know is that most people want to have a place, go to a place, and you said this when you did the benefits of a group, a place where they gain something, where they're learning something, and then also that they might take away something, that they actually have something actionable to do. So are your meetings, your events, the coalition groups that you are the work that you're doing, is it a learning community for people? And
I'm going to wordsmith it, but
so we just opened the line if you'd like to say something about maybe an example of what you're doing that creates a learning community for your members, and then we can talk a little bit more about it.
Okay.
You can also write things if you want.
You can type
into the question box if you have. What might be an example of how you're creating a learning community?
So one of the things that comes to my mind, LJ, while people are thinking, is that it's a safe space during the meeting to ask, like,
this I was really confused about.
What is
enabling service?
Right.
Or
what it is.
that people feel comfortable asking questions about things that they don't know without an embarrassment.
Right. I mean, obviously it relates to first recruiting people and keeping people coming back, orienting people, and the last poll we did is engaging people, keeping people engaged. This is a big, what we believe is a big part of it. So any idea of something you might do that you think would be a learning community? There's not really a right or wrong answer here. I mean, a learning community is anything where folks feel like they're growing and gaining.
It's not lining up. No,
so Elizabeth Pachon says, we had the Onlyville Hes come visit and share their experiences. So that's great. That's a sharing partner and sharing kind of thing with another Hes, some of the things they're doing. And again, I think those are great. Those involve planning and time, but it's a great idea people love networking and sharing generally. That they feel like you're gaining and they get a chance to hear other people's experiences like theirs.
I guess there's 14,000 kids that are born a year. No, it's less than that now, right? It's more like 10,000, right?
Just give it we'll give it a minute more.
Divided by 1 million equals 0.01%.
The learning communities can be set up as something very structural, so that it can be the beginning of each meeting or the end of each meeting where people are able to network and talk to somebody else about a question that came up.
So here
they make it a
talked about this one, increasing activity.
And Michelle Barron writes here that, hi Michelle from the Department of Health, we use the learning community as a place to gain knowledge and share with one another. So I think that is, when most people think of a learning community, they think of the sharing, which both of these are really good examples. Judy just gave a really good example at the beginning and the end of meetings to really do that sharing networking. Other things I think are maybe you might not have thought of are really more concrete, but they're up there on the slide, where members really have roles and responsibilities. We talked just a minute ago about sharing facilitation. That's a great skill to have, and it's not easy, and you have to be careful, because I think poorly facilitated meetings are meetings that really drive people away. But co-facilitation can work. Working with somebody, it involves planning. I'd be careful about just anybody saying we want to facilitate, but if you are doing some sort of rotating facilitation, really working with folks that are newer in building those skills, that people get to make decisions. They get to vote with a straw poll or vote with dots, or really have some ability. And by that, I'll just quickly explain, a straw poll is not a vote. It doesn't mean it's a vote. It means you're getting a sense of the room, and I really like that strategy in terms of moving people forward, because sometimes you get kind of stuck and you think, oh, we're really divided about it. Let's do a quick straw poll. Do you want to use this park as your event space, or do you want to use the aquarium as your event space? And all of a sudden everyone votes. You find everyone in the room really wants to use the park. You don't need to spend a lot of time feeling like, oh, we have to struggle with this. You got a quick sense of the room, and a straw poll might not make someone who voted again, who doesn't want to use the park, feel so left out because it wasn't an official vote. And then you can maybe talk about it a little more to get to consensus if that's your goal. And then voting with dots, many of you have probably seen that, but that's when you put up, it's really a prioritizing maneuver where you put up a lot of different issues and people each get 3 or 4 dots depending on your strategy. And you can vote on which ones that you want to focus on, and so it's a way to prioritize. But it's moving around. It's people getting to see what other people want. So those are both good strategies in terms of kinds of decision making. Members also learning new skills and knowledge. So not only you can definitely get that through sharing and networking, but also bringing in specific people to speak, to train folks on a strategy, to learn about conflict resolution or about motivational interviewing, which are 2 skills that people are very interested in, or learning about biking routes, or about healthy nutrition in retail and stores. These are skills and knowledge people can use, and often what I find interesting is people say, I can really use this in my work, but I can also use it in my personal life, and I think that's double the value. It's good incentive. A culture of active learning, that's so important. We spend so much. I think what's easiest for most of us, because the way most of us were in school, is to sit and to listen or to have a PowerPoint. I think that can be valuable, but I really believe in the we do here. That's one of the things Judy and I were asked to do at your last conference or workshop, is to really help people think about how to make it more active, how to really get people to talk, discuss, have questions, have activities. There's lots of ways to do that. Not only have people just sit and listen. Judy already brought up the culture of safety and curiosity. You feel comfortable asking what LGBT means if you don't really know. And how do you make that helpful? Do you use agreements or ground rules at the beginning of a meeting to say that this is a place where you can ask questions? Or break into small groups and pairs. I think that's always really helpful in letting people feel more comfortable. And a culture of community building. Do you spend time, and we talked about this earlier, welcoming people, having people get a chance to at least know the names of everybody. So that's really what a learning community is, and that brings us to sort of close to the close of our slide. We do have a little part of our show, our presentation. We have a little cartoon at the end here. So what is engagement? It's recruitment, it's engagement, it's retention, but it's all of these things. Education and consultation and communication, partnerships, participation, and extensions, a way of extending work. So there's many different ways to engage people. There's many different ways to find partners and focus on partnerships, and it's all a part of sustainability. So on that note, we have a few minutes, about 7 or 8 minutes for questions. So we wanted to leave it open to questions, or again, if you want to type anything in to share, we would love to hear them at this point. I will bring up that there was one question earlier. Somebody asked about, Olivia, I believe, asked about how do you write a grant as a collaborative? I would say, in response to that question, writing a grant as a collaborative can be complicated, but generally there's a lead organization, and that can get decided on a number of ways: who has the most capacity, who has the most chance of getting the grant, who has the best relationship with the funder. I think the most successful way of a collaborative writing a grant is to be sure that other partners are included in the grant, and that there's subcontracts or subgrants, or if there's not really enough funding to do that this time, that it rotates, and the next grant that comes up, a different partner gets to be the lead partner. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, and I think if it's just a discussion that you have about what are the gains for the coalition, as well as what are the gains for those who are directly receiving the funding. Sometimes it's, I've seen it where the small grants are easy to do. So if it's $10,000 and it's going to go for your annual event and everybody feels good about it because it's really for the good of the coalition, there's not much discussion. If it's a $100,000 grant and 2 partners are going to benefit most, then there's lots more discussion about it. But I think that, yeah, it takes time for the decision to be fair and also, I think, transparent on how the decision was made. But it can be really successful, especially, I have to go back to the, disagreements and running a meeting so that people feel heard and coming to a consensus where everybody understands what the final decisions are.
Well, I think we've said it earlier, but trust and transparency are huge, huge pieces of this. I think that is really such an important place. And all of these things we've touched on in partnerships, which is connected to sustainability, communication and retention and engagement of members, they all require some thought and some skill. And I think to continue, one of the things we really appreciate about your work with the HESs is that you really have a commitment to training and to really continuing to build your skills and knowledge in these areas.
Great. And so I also just wanted to share, because this was only a little bit of information about a lot of different components. A wonderful resource is called Community Toolbox, and I have the website right there, and it's run out of the University of Kentucky, and it has almost every resource that you can imagine on coalition work. So
it really does.
Yeah, on how to run meetings, on how to make decisions, on how to put together communication messages, on how to recruit, on how to come up with governance structures that work for your size organization. So I would encourage everybody to check that out. And you're unmuted, so if you want to jump in and ask a question now. We have a few more minutes
Or
left.
if you want to type in a question, we can try to respond, or if we don't have an answer, maybe one of you might have a response.
Yeah, any wisdom from the group, too, on lessons you've learned in the last couple of years or throughout your experience? So there's a question, any ideas for incentives to keep partners coming? That's a good one.
Well, I think if you go back to the slide, or when you get access to the slides, the one about benefits, I think there's a lot in there. I do really believe in recognition, in affirmations, in certificates. We make a lot of certificates here, and they do mean things to people. I believe in building relationships is a huge incentive. Having time for people to just talk about what they're doing and get what some of their needs met. Having even announcements as a regular part of your meeting is a big incentive for some people. Obviously, food is an incentive people talk about a lot. If you do have a way of appreciating people more concretely through gift cards, through T-shirts, it depends again on your audience, what they need and what they want in terms of incentives.
Yeah, I think I would ask the group too.
Yeah.
What would keep you coming back? Sometimes it's simple barriers, like I would be able to come all the time if I had childcare available.
Yeah.
And so then you might be able to partner with folks who are able to offer safe childcare.
I think really, I think it can be sort of challenging as well, but I think rotating the time of meetings, not only having them, or maybe keeping your core meeting at a certain time for consistency, but having different ways of people to come together, having a coffee in the morning, having a after work meeting. I think integrating social time, and social time doesn't just have to be social, it can really be networking time for your profession as well, but unstructured or structured networking time I think is really valuable as an incentive.
And then we had Emily share that tries to attend collaborative members events, always a really good relationship strategy, and they also promote events on their Facebook page.
Yeah, what can you offer other folks? That's great, Emily. You can offer them advertisement on your Facebook. You can offer them going to their events, because people always want people to come to their events. So if you can put into your schedule to attend somebody else's event, people are always so appreciative when you make the effort or you can attend.
Yeah, and I was thinking, LJ, when you were talking about social time, I think celebrating successes is an absolute necessity for
even
coalition
small
work.
Ones, yeah.
Yes. At your next meeting, if there's something that you did well, hand in your final report and get your budget in on time. Celebrate that.
Every meeting having a time for assesses and affirmations. We do
that's one of the things that, this is Mia. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up. So great. I'm glad you raised it. But yeah, just always recognize successes, even if they're very small, because I think the one thing that really truly brings people back is a feeling of accomplishment. And if you don't feel like you're getting anything done, you don't feel like you're moving forward, that's what's inevitably going to cause people to leave in many cases. So really drawing attention to not even just the big wins, which obviously that's something people generally recognize it needs to be celebrated, but really small things that at least, as you're saying, bring that to the table. Recognize that even small benchmarks have been accomplished.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think that was well said and sounds like a great place to end our session. We have up on our slide, this is how to get in touch with us. We both work here at Health Resources in Action, and as you've heard, did a lot of work with coalitions and have done some work with the HES. And we also really want to ask you to do the pop-up evaluation that right directly after we end, it will come up. And if you could click on it and complete it, that would really be helpful. The recorded presentation will be available through the Rhode Island Department of Health, so you will have access to it. And we just,
as well as the slides.
As well as the slides. So we really appreciate you and affirm you for taking time in your very busy day to spend a little time thinking about how to make your work even go better and go more smoothly.
Yeah, and best of luck in moving your HES forward. And I think that the whole structure of addressing health equity throughout the state is a really brilliant one, and it's one that's being looked at nationally. So the rest of the country is looking to you to
You're
show them the
cutting
way.
edge. You're cutting edge leaders. So we're happy to be a small part of it. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.